Hello and welcome to this Luton Sixth Form College Animate on this fundamental question: what is an essay? I say it's fundamental because it's probably the most important thing that you as a student need to figure out while at this college. And if you don't, then you'll be figuring it out at university. You might even be figuring it out after university. What I think is bizarre about this question is that for something that's so important, there is, relatively speaking, not much time in the timetable devoted to teaching people what an essay actually is. To make matters worse, if you think to yourself about all those times you've got essays given back to you, there might be some very useful feedback on that essay about how you should change the structure of the essay or how you should start the introduction, and yet the teacher invariably also puts on that essay a grade. Now, it probably comes as no surprise for me to say that when the grade is there as well, everything else that's written on the piece of paper is of no interest to the student, and all that ends up happening is students talk about what grades they got. Essays are questions, and perhaps we all need to remind ourselves of that. And it's a question which is going to be complicated. If it's not complicated, there's no point setting the question. You can see the complication because there is a debate. And if your essay doesn't reflect a debate, for example, there's a for and against, then you need to ask yourself whether you've read the question correctly. In this video, I'm going to be referring to a classic essay question, which are what were the causes of World War I? But I'm hoping even if you know very little about the First World War, you might be more troubled by the number of different reasons for that war. To help us with this video, I've tried to arrange it into various principles. And I'll talk about the first principle. This is one that invariably writers fall at the first hurdle, and that hurdle is answering the question set out in the introduction. And personally, I like to see an answer in the first sentence. If you get that down, there's clarity, and the marker will thank you for it. By that I mean he or she will give you a high mark. I'm going to tell you about a couple of problems that students have. And one of them is that students often get sidetracked. They get confused by detail and they don't see the big picture. Now, with my classes, I sometimes, just to remind them that they need to answer the question, I sometimes ask, what did they have for breakfast? They're pretty good at that. They can give me an answer. I had a bowl of cornflakes. Or I had some Red Bull or some other very unnutritional breakfast that I find that my students have eaten. But we can agree that they've answered the question. I then go to their essays and find that they have written the equivalent in their introduction of John Henry Kellogg invented cornflakes in 1894 for his patients. Clearly, we don't have an answer to the question of what you ate for breakfast. We've got a description about a breakfast cereal. So you need to make sure that you're answering that question. They also might do something else. If we go back to the First World War question, they might say, oh look, there's a debate about what caused the First World War. Well, that doesn't quite do it for me either. What I need is for them to say, these are the reasons for World War I. I don't want them to tell me there's a debate about the reasons for World War I. I just want them to tell me what the reasons are. It's almost like they're writing a remove. Right, the second principle I want you to know about is one that I have already referred to, which is clarity. And the clarity starts right with the first line. Your intro is your answer to the question. So you need to make sure that you get your key ideas down, you need to say what the answer is, and you need to signpost how the rest of the essay goes. It is a simple overview of your answer. Later in your paragraphs you can go into detail. Okay, I'm going to give you an analogy here, which is that I think you should look at an introduction as a map, but it's a map of 10,000 feet from very far away. It should be a brief outline on how you're going to get from one place to another. your paragraphs are not at 10,000 feet. Your paragraphs are now at 100 feet. Here, you have room to really show, the topography of where you're going to go, the details of what you're going to be talking about. But yeah, you need to make sure that your introduction does exactly that. It introduces what you're talking about. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of this clarity in my introduction. I'm going to go back to that First World War essay question, and I'm going to say, so what were the causes of the First World War? I'm going to say there are 3 causes for World War I. Nationalism was one of these, where various countries focused on narrow national interests. Another one was militarism. So there was a huge increase in the defence spending of major European powers. And the final reason was imperialism. And the challenge here was getting and keeping overseas territories, for example, in Africa and India, in Asia.
Loves us some squeaky markers.
If you want to, you could be even a bit flashy here, and you say, indeed, one historian put it that Germany's failure to find its place in the sun, because the other empires of France, Britain, and Russia were already there, was a major reason for the war itself. Okay, my third principle is one that you've probably all heard before, and that is that your paragraphs need to have a structure. Now, the structure you've all been told about is P-E-E. I think this is brilliant. I think it's a brilliant acronym. It works beautifully. So follow it. Your PAR should have one idea, and that is the topic sentence, the first sentence, your opening sentence. The rest of your paragraph should just be evidence and explanation. What I see, though, with students is that students, instead of having PEE, they have EPE, evidence, point, explanation. For example, they might say something like, Bismarck increased Germany's military spending by 200% when he was Chancellor. This was in line with Britain. Historian A.J.P. Taylor said blah, 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 blah. Now, with that bit I've just talked about, yeah, it may be relevant to your essay, but it's not a PEE paragraph. It's not clear. There's no point there to make it relate to the essay question. Instead, you should be writing something like this. One cause of World War I was European militarism. Under Kaiser Wilhelm II, Germany's defence budget quadrupled. There was huge boat building, which prompted the British to also up their defence spending. And here, you see, we've got this beautifully clear P point. And then you can see that I'm beginning to develop my evidence and explanation. Now, I'm going to say this. If your intro is clear, you have a clear answer to that question, and your paragraphs follow this basic PEE structure, you'll be doing very, very well. And you're nearly there. But I want to just talk to you about one final principle, and that's your conclusion. Your conclusion should reflect your introduction. It's like a mirror. I don't want you bringing in new ideas. It should be a reiteration of your opening. You can perhaps go into a bit more depth if you like, but the key task is to summarize all of the key points of your essay and, in a sense, emphasize, just to make it clear, what the answer is. However, there is one thing that you can do that would be, a nifty way of showing that you're clever, that you're an independent thinker, that you are a candidate that should get the highest possible grade. And this is important. One of the key things that you will be doing as writers in an essay is trying to distinguish yourself from all your peers who are writing basically the same essay. And if you suddenly switch it and think to yourself, what is life like as an exam marker or as the teacher having to mark 30 different essays? Well, if all of a sudden one of the students is answering something a bit different or has an interesting idea, then you give them marks. So what I'm going to ask you to do in the conclusion is that I'd like you to think about how you can challenge the question. So with this question about causes of World War One, answer that question, but in the conclusion you can say, okay, so what cause of the three that we've talked about was the most preventable? If one of these factors had been reduced, would the risk of war have lessened? I think you can answer that question. You might want to give a brief summary about what your thinking is, but the key thing is to show the marker that you are thinking around the question, and as I said, you will get credit for that.